Blue-white weekend, still cleaning up some things from how the weekend went. It is a Wednesday, but that's when we do our BWI Live Penn State football show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Nate Bauer, and Sean Fitz with me, as always, wrapping up the spring. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the show today. We got some things coming up with the portal, of course. We'll be talking to James Franklin between the lines, and, of course, the BWI Mailbag at the end of the show. So there's a lot of great stuff on the docket for today. But Nate, how are you doing today? What's the situation in your household?
What? It's it's always frantic. I have a car inspection today, so I dropped that off, and now I'm here, and I'm ready to talk about Penn State football and basketball. I can't wait.
Yeah, let's start there because we talk about recruiting. We focus a lot on Penn State football, but it was a big weekend for, I imagine, all the sports, but especially basketball. So you got anything coming up this week about that?
I have the juice.
Ooh.
I got it. It's happening.
Wow.
There's some hoops juice. We've got Penn State basketball visitors coming over the next couple of weeks. Some reactions, some guys that are still in the portal from Penn State going one way or the other. Obviously, Jameel Brown broke earlier this week on Monday, is returning to Penn State. So that's big news for Mike Rhodes and his staff. So, yeah, it's one of those things. The season ends, and it was such a whirlwind. And for as much activity as there was during that process for Penn State basketball, like, this is just 10 times that, right? It just, you just a new coach and a completely rebuilt roster. So always stuff going on. Check me out.
Yeah, great time to tell you BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is the place to get that information from Nate. Sign up right now and get access for $29.99 until the start of Penn State football, all the way through the end of August, and the regular season begins. Great time also to remind you to like this video and subscribe to Blue White Illustrated on YouTube so you don't miss any breaking news. We've had so many commitments over the last couple of days. All those you can check out Blue White Illustrated on YouTube, our commitment videos. Of course, the breakdowns at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Fitz, we're going to get to you here in just one second, but because it was Blue-White weekend, we got to get a Blue-White game recap from everybody. So the Blue-White game has come and gone, and we're just going to have a conversation about it today to start the show. So Fitz, one thing I always like to ask Nate is, like, if you've watched the game back since the first time watching it live, anything change about your opinion of what you saw?
Not particularly. I mean, I think I came away with a sense that Penn State has a lot to work on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think that's breaking news or anything like that. The quarterbacks, I think, did some really nice things, but I think you see a lot of that process coming through. And that's what we said coming into spring. This wasn't going to be a situation where you snap your fingers and all of a sudden Drew is a guy that's, producing at the same level that Sean was at the end of his career. So I think that there's, I think it's good to see that for Penn State fans to keep expectations in check. I think this is going to be a really good football team, a ton of talent everywhere. But at the same time, it's a process, and we're going to see that process come to fruition. I liked it that they got out there and got those young receivers reps. And, I still think Keandre Lambert-Smith and Trey Wallace have work to do, but, like, you need to figure out the bottom of that rotation if you're going to have any chance. And what that comes to play is, how are they going to work with personnel groupings? How are they going to work Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren? And do you go two tight ends, two receivers as not your base package, but, like, is that how you attack teams? So I think there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, a very vanilla game plan in terms of offense, which you would expect for, whether your quarterback's a fourth-year starter or a first-year starter. You're not going to throw too much at them in the spring game, a limited amount of personnel packages and things like that. So, like, it's overreaction season. I didn't get too high or too low off of this. I saw some good things, saw some things that need to work on, and that's what you expect coming out of spring ball.
Did you see enough from, and this is something I've talked about in terms of, I think you make a great point when you mention not too many personnel packages, not too many things that probably aid the quarterback, advantages that the offense can use that you want to keep under wraps for the regular season. So that's also a part of when you evaluate a player is the environment in which they're playing. I guess from the perspective of Aller, did you see enough of the special stuff? Some of the things that you want to see flash of, oh, wow, that's different than what we saw with Sean Clifford or from quarterbacks in the past. That did you see enough of that to make you feel like this year could be special? And again, not to take too much, but also just, the hints of what might be there.
Yeah, I hate to take too much out of that, but like the little things where he's under pressure and all of a sudden he flicks it 30 yards. It's those little things that can get him out. Like, I don't want to say the margin of error, because we're going to focus on that sidearm throw, and that sidearm throw was great, but like that's not, you don't want that to be his game, but you want to have that. I think his trainer Brad said you have that in your tool belt. He has that in his tool belt. He has the ability to get away. He's also huge. Like, he's very, very big and can withstand, sort of like the Roethlisberger thing where it was tough to take him down, even though, he was not the most elusive quarterback in the league. So he's got a lot of those things that I think can extend plays. And when he can extend plays, he's got the arm to really just turn it into something legitimate, or even crazier, throw the ball away, throw the ball out of bounds. And that sometimes is the best play. So I think he's got some of that going. I was while we're on quarterbacks, impressed by the way that Prabula was able to release the ball. Like he's never had the cleanest release. And, we saw it like first drive, he threw that wheel route and it was pretty. I mean, it was a legitimate pretty pass regardless of who was throwing the ball. So I saw enough that I feel pretty decent about that coming out of it. Again, a lot of work to do. The other thing, and you kind of alluded to this, is they're not scheming up a game plan to beat Penn State's defense. They're not scheming up a game plan to beat the opposition. Like, they're scheming up their stuff to run their bread and butter, to run the plays that they're, or the base packages and everything like that. And you're not going to get too far removed from that stuff. And I think that needs to be taken into account. Protection needs to be better. You're going to get an All-American offensive tackle back, so that kind of helps. But you want to see Caden Wallace be better. You want to see Drew Shelton be better. We're so convinced after seeing Drew Shelton as a freshman that he's going to step in and be the guy, and he showed he has a long way to go as well. So little things like that, and I think it's fine to come away from this game and say, hey, his defense is going to be fantastic. Like, this defense is going to be awesome. But most of what we're going to talk about coming out of the spring game is going to be on the offensive side of the ball for good reason. Yeah,
and Nate, let's go right to you about that. Anything Bo Prabula related? We talked about Drew Aller. Anything Bo Prabula related that stood out to you, or just generally what you take away from the game as well? Because I don't want to pin you down to something that maybe it's not, you don't have any interest in talking about. I kind of want to just talk about the game. Like, what do you think about what you saw?
Well, honestly, I don't think it's getting enough attention, but I would assume that you guys feel the same way. Mike Yurcich's clock management there at the end of the first half.
Really? Yeah, he lit him up though. Like, you're making a joke, but he lit him up when he didn't spike the ball. So like, I don't even know if you were watching at that point, but you just made a salient point here, whether you tried to or not. So
no,
Franklin was PO'd. You saw him go from the midfield to sideline very quickly.
But that's part of the learning thing. Is it's great that he can throw the ball and throw the hell out of it. Like, it's fantastic. But like, those are the things that are going to, save you 3 points here, get you 3 points, so those are the things. And I keep saying the same thing about these quarterbacks. Sean Clifford was so great before the snap, like putting guys in the right position to get in the right position when the play starts. After the play starts, kind of hit and miss. These guys need to get there. And that's where that's where we weren't going to see anything like that in the spring game, because you're not really asking guys to make checks and things like that. You're going to go back in the film room and talk about that. But that's where they need to make the big strides, and clock management falls into that as well.
Yeah, I'll be giving some of my thoughts on the quarterbacks today. Hopefully, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com with a film breakdown of those guys. Some interesting things that I picked up from that I do think you can take away even from spring game in terms of reading the field, play under pressure, some of the things that more people were open than I think that it seemed like at first glance. Now, they weren't at certain points as well, but it was just an interesting first half, second half dichotomy from the quarterbacks too. A lot of that to get into. And again, we'll check that out, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Nate, you say something?
I was just going to ask, this might be a dumb thing to ask, but right, like chicks dig the long ball, home runs. We talk about that constantly, but there wasn't, like, we don't have any idea where that is. At least I don't think that we were able to get that from the game in terms of where Aller and his receivers are in terms of those connections, because they didn't didn't take any, as far as I
So
can remember.
there were a couple of plays where it was designed that way, and Aller chose to check it down or go to a second read. And those are the situations that I'm talking about. So there were some in the first half. Now, later on in the game, the defense was playing a lot of too high safety coverage. So there weren't as many. And that probably, because the end of the game and how that felt, that's, I think, accurate, where there was a lot of checking the ball down. There was a lot of, it's designed to go deep, but the linebackers and safeties were playing so deep that then the underneath routes were open. So it's a mixed bag. And that's kind of there were some opportunities. They were obviously under pressure because nothing was clean for these guys on Saturday. And that was kind of the point, is stress them, put them in an environment where they're going to get pressure at some point this year. And can they then continue to process and go through their reads and stuff like that? So from the quarterback perspective, I think it was learning some of those things that, as Fitz talked about, these are young guys. So they're not going to be perfect. They're not going to have all of these things down, but it's, what are the indicators? What are okay, he leans towards this. And for me, an area just where Prebula is so quick in his decision-making. He is precise, and sometimes I think, he did a good job, make the joke of throwing the ball away a couple times, maybe a little too quickly, but he has that maturity about him to say, okay, this play is dead, and I'm not going to be able to do too much about it. The problem is then when you throw the ball away 3 times, and then you take a sack by falling on your butt 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage with Zane Durant at your feet. So again, even there, a little mixed bag of decision-making, play under pressure, and kind of the tidiness of those environments where you're not having all of those advantages of, they weren't running a ton of RPOs. They weren't running a lot of complex formations and packages. Something that I want to get to that I think we talked about in our post game, the guys that stood out, Dennis-Sutton, KJ Winston. I tend to gloss over the obvious at times, but they were awesome. I do want to talk about underrated performances. Fitz, do you have anybody that, upon going back and thinking about it, that you said, yeah, that guy actually was really good, but I didn't notice it for one reason or another?
So we knew this guy was really good before, but Katron Allen, he got a lot of time, not only as a running back, 4 carries for 15 yards, but also as a receiver. Made a really nice catch behind his head on a ball that was kind of pitch and catch from Drew. That was not a very good throw. So I liked what I saw from Katron Allen. Like I said, we're going to overlook those running backs because we know what they are. We believe we know what they are. We believe that they're going to have ample room to run and things of that nature. But I think looking back at it, Katron Allen is such a good player who probably doesn't get his due just because of we think we know so much about the running backs, and that's fine. So I really like what I saw from him. I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table, what those 2 guys can bring to the table as a running game. I think it's got potential to be big time, and it's going to help those quarterbacks a lot. And when they start scheming for actual defenses, that's a weapon to have him as a receiver. They don't throw a ton to the running backs, but to have those guys available as receivers makes you feel better about the entire offense.
Yeah, I think especially with as vertical as Mike Yurcich likes to get things with the receivers, having a couple guys that can leak out an underneath coverage, that's a huge benefit, to have that ability to check down.
We've typecast him as Fat Man, essentially, between the tackles runner. So he's a talented all around back. So I think that's worth noting. We talk so much about, Nick is the home run hitter, Katron the down to down guy, but Katron's pretty talented all around back. So I was excited to see, him sort of pop up in that receiver role this week.
Nate, do you have anybody?
I don't know. I don't think anybody that truly stands out. I thought that some of James's mentions after the game were kind of intriguing, just because in terms of the receivers, right? He brought up Malik McClain, which I don't know if he's a guy that's at the forefront of anybody's minds right now, just based on the spring and the winter.
Only if you don't mention him. Yeah.
What's that?
I said only if you don't mention him, then he's at the forefront of their minds.
Okay, well then, fine. But no, Malik McClain, I thought, had a couple of nice catches. Obviously, Caden Saunders is a guy who I think fan sentiment is waiting, right? It's almost like they're just impatient. Fans are impatient for him to get going. But again, young guy who has had some work to do, I think, in the weight room. I think that's fair, nutrition wise, to get bigger, more durable, kind of climb that level to become distinctive. And so coming out with 4 catches, 57 yards, I thought that was a pretty good afternoon for him. So there's, again, like James Franklin saying it. And we talked about this after the game, but them believing that there are 6 guys currently in that room that can play at this level and can fulfill and be those types of receivers indicates kind of where, like, it's not for a lack of talent or playmaking ability or the ability to catch the ball. It's simply, can they do it every down? Can they do things that distinguish themselves? And, obviously Saturday afternoon, a couple of those guys had some opportunities and took advantage of it.
Caden was one guy I went back and I didn't have a favorable opinion of his performance despite the catches coming out of the game because of some of the miscommunication between him and Aller. That being said, going back, he did have some really tough catches. Some of those, talk about the getting behind the defense in those too high safety situations. He did a great job of coming down with some really tough acrobatic catches. So I agree with you there. That's a good one. Two guys stood out to me.
That's kind of him in a nutshell. Just what Nate said, right? Down to down. Like, there was one where he was running an out pattern and he flattened out his route. And he's supposed to come back a little bit, and they had that conversation. He and Drew had that conversation. That's the little things that are going to get him where he needs to be. And he showed. I don't think he's there yet. So I think that's logical to jump to that. He caught the ball away from his body. I thought that was something he did well, which he hasn't typically done over the years. So like I think that's been a good step of progress. But you're right. Nate said it. How do you distinguish yourself among this group, and what has he done for that? I still think he's got steps to go. So I think you're both on it. It's all about consistency with a guy like that.
Yeah. 2 guys that stood out to me. One really didn't have a whole lot of plays, but Daquan Hardy, I thought, was much more confident than he was last season. The way he played in this game looked like the guy from 2021. So I want to see more there. I want to see it because him being more involved on third down changes the numbers and changes some of the things with the players you want to have on the field. And I think if you are Manny Diaz, you'd love to have that weapon of the ultimate slot corner to cover guys and be super sticky down the field. If he can recover that, I think it's another weapon for the defense. And then I'm always high on Landon Tengwall, and I was happy to see he looked more like himself in this game. A little more power, looked a little more confident than I've seen from his play in the last couple times we saw him on the field in the regular season. So for me, those are the guys when I went back and I watched and saw a little bit different, something I was looking for from those plays. Do you have a specific, and this will be the last thing, this is kind of a fun thing, do you have a play of the game, something that was like sticks with you after the game? Fitz, you got something?
Oof. Aside from the touchdown, not particularly. The pass from Prabula up the side of the wheel route.
I love
really
that
good. Johnny Dixon's hit of Liam Clifford. Did we see Liam after that? That was a shot. Was it Dixon? It was Dixon, right?
Yeah, it was Dixon. I can't remember if he was in the game. He didn't get another catch for sure, but I don't remember if he. I think he was in the game a little bit later doing swing passes and things like that.
Yeah. So, in terms of like, I don't want to say a boring game, but there was a lot that went on in a short period of time, but nothing that was overwhelming. I mean, the score was 10-0. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. So there was some of that. I like to follow the comical things. You mentioned Bo falling down on his butt. That was great. But other than that, no, not really. Tyler Jazansky had a good game snapping. I'll go back to that. And, that's kind of where I'm at with Blue White. I mean, it's the thing to remember, and I think I'll underplay it here because it's one of 15 practices. We get a glimpse into it. Some guys might have a bad day. Some guys might have a good day. Not getting too high or too low one way or the other. But in terms of play of the games, it's tough to come away with that or anything that Dennis-Sutton didn't do because he was freaking a monster.
Yeah. Fitz, do you want to contribute or do you want to pass? You feel free to pass if you want.
No, I mean, he just set me up perfectly. I actually put it in my highs and lows that the best hit was not on a tackle. It was, and I understand the Johnny Dixon hit has to probably take the cake here, but deny unloading on Katron Allen in the backfield on the play that Drew kept it and he ended up, I don't know, 10-yard run, whatever it was, but then I just kind of knifed through and blew him up. I don't know. To me, stuff like that is, it's not just that he has the ability to get there, it's that he has the ability to inflict damage when he does. Right, like that combination of things. If Katron is the quarterback in that situation, you can foresee some havoc things happening on the other end of those hits.
Yeah. I would say my answer was the same as Fitz's, of the throw to Mari Evans in the high red zone to get him down to the goal line. That was a great throw by Perbula. Really, just in between two zones, has to throw it with timing and pace. I love that play. The other one was the very first play of the game where you've got Denai coming off the edge and tipping the ball out of the quarterback's hands for an incomplete pass on the very first play, because that set the tone for what was going to happen for the rest of the day. Steven says, thanks as always for the coverage. Appreciate you, buddy. I always appreciate you being here. And David says his play of the game was Amari shoving Storm Duck to the ground for a touchdown. I thought that was comical as well. We had a bit of a conversation about that on the Lions Den message board about whether or not we should be concerned about that or not. I was like, it's just funny. Like, he straight up shoved him to the ground and they gave him the touchdown.
I think one thing that gets overlooked a little bit during a game like this is we're talking about all these guys, and yes, Drew Aller, right, is going to be significant, and Katron Allen, they're going to be significant. Some of those contributors to the game itself are expected to be very significant, but a lot of the guys that are expected to be significant didn't have anything to do with it, right? Like, we weren't calling Abdul Carter's name most of the afternoon. We weren't calling, some of those guys that you would anticipate are going to have a pretty huge role on this team this season. So I think it speaks a little bit to the depth that they're developing, right? That they have options, not just to make plays with those top line guys, but there's some pretty talented guys sitting just beneath the surface there in the second team, at least on the defense.
Yeah, it's fun to watch guys like Tamir Robinson, Elliot Washington flashed a couple of times. Who am I missing? Oh, Flowers was out there a few times. And so he looked tiny. I mean, he looked very, very skinny, which, that's been Mekhi his whole career. So, but no, he looked pretty solid. So, I mean, they just keep stacking dudes on that defensive side of the ball, and that's fun to watch. It's so funny because we just talked about underrated guys, and Nate and I went back to offense, even though, how do you underrate that offense that really didn't do a ton on Saturday? The defense is just like, the expectations of the defense are so high that we don't even really consider them to be underrated or anything like that.
Yeah, a couple of guys I pointed out earlier this week. You can check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great time to remind you of all the stuff coming up, because we will be getting to the transfer portal in just a little bit, but there's going to be information you need. And BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, sign up now, $29.99 through the end of the season. We're only on here twice a week, and we only really talk about the Penn State football team here on this Wednesday show. So if you want the information, it all flows through BlueWhiteIllustrated.com first. One thing we got to get to that I'm always happy to do here on the show is talk to you about our sponsor, and that is Rogue Shop. Rogue Shop is the small batch craft cannabis farmers from Wisconsin. We talk about them here on the show all the time. Mr. Rogan Shar from Eau Claire, Washington. I don't know how to pronounce French words. Anyway,
Wisconsin. You just butchered every part of that, but go on.
Good. All right. Well, the main thing you need to know is that RogueShop.com is here to help you live a better life and to help you with your ability to thrive is the word I want to use, because they help you with any sort of malady that can be cured or helped with CBD and cannabis. One of the health and wellness salves, they have lip balms, bath soaks, hemp soap, CBD flower, hot cocoa, if that tickles your fancy. All these different ways you can ingest THC and CBD to help you live a better life, whether it is pain, inflammation, joint stiffness. They've got something for everybody. And if you use the promo code BWI for 10% off at rogueshop.com, I'm reading it just like you at the bottom of the screen, because I need to make sure I remember these things to say them correctly, because if you don't use the right promo code, you don't get 10% off. BWI for 10% off at rogueshop.com. Okay, so let's get to our next part of the show, which I really enjoy this part, where we get to talk to James Franklin and read between the lines.
They have both gotten reps with runs.
All right, gentlemen, our first conversation with James Franklin has to do with something that happened pregame, which is the national
Asking
anthem.
me what he can do with the pipes?
Yeah, well,
That's out of my area of expertise.
I'm just kidding. We're not talking about that today. What we are talking about is the transfer portal window. I just scared everybody on screen. I didn't tell anybody I was going to do that. We are talking about the transfer portal and what Penn State is looking for now that camp has broke.
I think we're in a good place right now, but I think we need some more depth and more competition at D tackle. I think we need some more depth and competition at wide receiver, because I do think we could get by West Virginia or by game 4 or game 5. I think we could have 6 guys that we feel good about, but it's not competitive right now. We're trying to figure out who the third is, although a guy stepped up today. I want there to be legitimate competition at every position. And then besides that, we won't turn down a great player at any position. So, the coaches were talking about, the phones are buzzing. It's all over the place right now. It's crazy. I addressed it with our team in the locker room afterwards.
So this has been something I find interesting coming out of the game, is that it kind of feels like a little bit out of one side of the mouth, one side of the other. Like, we believe in the guys we have, but we want more guys. So you have Dante Cephas, who's about to commit to Penn State here in May. Are they adding more? And does that say something to you about Malik McLean and how they feel that has gone so far this spring, Fitz?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think that he has kind of been the guy that they like. Remember when he committed, we were saying he's probably not a guy to step on right away. He's got to get, accustomed to this new speed, all that kind of stuff. And then he showed up in a 4.4, was fantastic. It's great. And then the expectations went up a little bit. And I think he performed to the expectations that we originally had for him. But, they went up. Naturally, they went up after he got on campus, started working out and things like that. So I think that is kind of where he sits, in that maybe 2024 is a time for him to be a guy, but I don't think he's there yet. So I have a tough time interpreting this one, because number one, he can't talk about Dante Cephas. Dante Cephas is supposed to be here next month. Like, he can't talk about him in the sense that he's already committed, part of the team, whatever. Yeah. Like, he can't talk about that. But at the same time, they've looked at 3 receivers before. Like, you look back to the transfer portal window, they had talked about that. I mentioned Gary Bryant the other day on the show. Like, they will keep looking for guys that are dudes that can play right away. Will you find them in the spring transfer portal? I have my doubts on like, unless it's a guy that they've been watching for a long, long time, probably not. But they're going to take the opportunity to reach out, to do their due diligence, and this is also team building. This is also building that 2024 roster, building that 2025 roster. Do you bring in a guy that's got 3 years left that can maybe be in the back end of that rotation, but at the same time, you're looking for the future. So that's the way I see it. That you're not pigeonholing yourself into just finding guys that are going to help you right away. And I know that kind of sounds kind of stupid, because that's kind of what the transfer portal has been all about for Penn State, is guys that can help them right away. But I think that there's an opportunity there. They offered 2 offensive linemen coming out of the portal, or that just went into the portal this week. So do they need offensive linemen? You look at the scholarship breakdown, not technically, but they're not going to turn guys down that they think can play here and can play well here. So you're trying to address future situations. Maybe offensive tackle in 2024 is a great example. Like, Caden's going to be gone, Ola's going to be gone. You got Drew Shelton back. You got a couple of guys that you think maybe are developmental guys, but you have an opportunity to start in 2024. Now, is that the best selling point for a guy that's in the portal right now? Probably not, but you're going to make your shot and or shoot your shot and trying to see if that can work out. I'm very curious to see if they look at maybe a kicker, maybe an underclassman corner. The positions that you don't really think about. What's going to make it tough is they're at the edge of the scholarship limit right now. Like, there's going to have to be attrition to add more guys. do you play that balancing act? Do you walk that line? That's the biggest question that I have right now. And, is it much different to take a wide receiver or to take an offensive tackle? I don't know. So I think that there is definite interest. They have these guys researching, watching tape. I don't want to say over scouting, but like doing a heck of a lot of legwork for probably a small return in terms of guys that go into the portal, guys that are already in the portal, things like that. So I'm very curious to see which direction they go to. I think they're going to explore all options, and they kind of owe it to themselves to do it. This is not free agency in the sense of like NFL free agency, but it's as close as you're going to get to in the college game to trying to plug holes when you can, and that's what they're doing.
Nate, you mentioned moving the goalposts after the game on Saturday. Do you, just for people here, kind of readdress what you were talking about there and how you think that it's not bad, if I'm remembering what you said correctly, like they feel like they found something out, but they also want more now. Is that kind of an accurate description of what you were talking about? Also, your mic is muted.
Sorry, Fitz was on a roll. I just didn't want to. Anyway, no, I think that the conversation throughout the spring, going into the spring, was we need to find a third. We need to find a third. We need to find a third. That was the hammering it home because Keandre Lambert-Smith and Trey Wallace had kind of separated themselves early in the process, whether that was even before spring practice started or certainly during spring practice, at the beginning of spring practice. And then by the end of the day on Saturday, it was, we really need 6. We're trying to have a room where there's 6 and that there's legitimate competition and there's, all the things that he just said, right? Is getting that room into a place where it's not so important that there's someone who pushes Keandre Lambert-Smith, although that would be good, certainly. It's more important that there's legitimate options all pushing each other at 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Like that little sector in the middle. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think you make a really great point there, and I want to bring this up. Fitz, we talked about this spring of Keandre Lambert-Smith playing in the slot. Is that going to happen? Is he going to play outside? And we saw a good bit of him playing in the slot during the blue-white game. So I think that's interesting that you talk about the position and wanting to push guys. And to me, like the slot is fine. It's, do you have guys that can push your young Amari Evans and that can push Harrison Wallace on the outside? Because James Franklin's also talked about, we need a guy that can break a tackle and go 80. And it's harder to do that from the slot. Just on average, I know that the slot is much more valuable than it used to be, and guys are, teams are putting their best player in the slot more frequently. But when he talks about like game breakers, he's talking about out wide, you break a tackle, you go 80. So does that also then narrow what you're looking for in the portal? If you do add another guy with Cephas coming in, you're looking for somebody who specifically can play on the outside. Is that a fair, like, we're done with slot, we feel good about that, we want somebody who can come in and be that big time guy on the outside?
I think they would lean that way. I don't think you put first off, you do yourself a disservice by saying we're only looking for outside guys at this point. They did that, and not that they did that, but they got McLean, who is an outside guy all the way. But Keandre is an inside out guy. You look at the other slot guys, Caden's in there, Liam Clifford's in there. You've got some other guys that, kind of work through that. And Keandre probably an inside out guy, of that group. So I don't really think that's the thought process. I think the thought process is who gives us the best chance to rotate through. They think that Cephas is an outside guy. They think that Cephas is a guy that can go the distance. Like they think he's really good. Is he going to live up to those expectations? We don't know. He's not here yet. So I think that you've put yourself in a position where you're just trying to add. It's sort of a BPA situation. It's draft season, so talk about best player available. So whether that guy is 5'10", whether that guy is 6'3", I kind of think it's irrelevant if he just can't get the job, if he can't get the job done. So that's where I would go with that. I would lean outside, yes, but I don't think you pigeonhole yourself into one specific one of those positions. Sorry.
Right. That's a really great point, especially when the portal, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what's going in anyway. Yeah. So we are going to be getting into the mailbag here in just 1 second, but I want to give you guys a chance if you have any last thoughts about the portal, and also to give our chat here a chance to think up some good questions. We got some good ones here coming up from the Lions That Meshes forum, but if you're in the chat right now, leave your question, and we'll get to the best ones during our next segment, and we'll be getting to that in the BWI mailbag. Guys, any last thoughts on the portal that you want to button up before we get to the mailbag?
Not on the portal, but Penn State is like doing really well in Wisconsin in recruiting, and you just butchering a name of the town and also the state. Like it looks pretty bad on us. So, you got to work on that before next week when Corey Smith announces.
Here's the thing. I probably in my head, I know how to say it, but then the first time I've ever said Eclair, Washington. We're moving on. None of our questions, as far as I know, come from Wisconsin today, so I am safe. Our first question from the BWI message forum, which again, subscribe BlueWhiteIllustrated.com to get there. Since the quarterbacks were under so much pressure, is that Manny Diaz's scheme, the defensive line having a strong pass rush, or a poor offensive line performance? This is something we talked about a little bit at the beginning of the show, but I don't think we've really given it the either-or treatment of... Are you more concerned about the offensive line coming out of that game, or are you more excited about the defensive line, Nate? Because this is always the nature of your team versus your team. Is there a problem, or is there a huge plus bonus on one side?
It's both, right? Let's be realistic about this. The offense is supposed to be behind the defense right now. Period. It's harder to do. There's more stuff. It's complex. And frankly, they didn't have Olu Fashanu on the field. Like, he makes a big difference. That said, is denied Dennis-Sutton poised to be really good? Yeah, absolutely. I think that Zariah Fisher is a guy who probably didn't get enough attention from Saturday, right?
Yep.
He's back, and he's gonna be a guy who contributes there at that defensive end position. So no, I think you can acknowledge the talent that is there on the defensive side of the ball, while simultaneously acknowledging that the starting offensive tackles that those guys are going to see in the Big Ten are probably better than some of the guys that they were facing on Saturday, who are largely reserves, right? Like they're not the starters. So, and simultaneously on the offensive line, it's the same deal. Right, that offensive line will be better in the fall because they're going to have all of their pieces. They're going to be the right pieces in the right places, and they're going to be farther along in their development. All of that stuff will help. So I'm going to call it a Switzerland. It's neutral.
Yes, not surprised that Nate has taken the neutral position.
Oh, ho hum, hem and haw.
Yeah,
that's just me.
Fitz, what do you think?
Tackles number 2 and 3 need to be better. Like, there's no getting around that. I don't think that, like, we kind of know what Caden is at this point, and regardless of the things that you hear, like, he's still, I think it's pretty well out there that that's the way he's been the last couple of years. So he needs to be better. Drew, you worry about the things that you hear about him on the right side. Like, James came out and said that. He doesn't say that, like, that pointed criticism all that often. So I think he's definitely got to get better. But I mean, that defense, it was blitzing from all levels, which was crazy in a spring game. But at the same time, those defensive ends really made them look tough. But yeah. I think having a top 5 to top 10 NFL draft pick at left tackle is going to help them. So I hate to take Nate's point here and run with it, but I think they're going to be better. I think they'll be okay. They'll be able to mix in a little bit more of the run game. I think Penn State, stayed away from the run game this week, kind of keep their guys up, keep their running backs healthy. So defense, I don't want to say they knew what was coming, but you really didn't have a diversified attack to deal with there. So I think that helps. So I lean neutral in the sense that this was a spring scrimmage and they're going to get pieces back. They're going to be fine. Nate, you were right. Good job. But yeah, I'm excited. At the same time, I'm excited for the defense, the pass rush. Like, we didn't see a ton from Chop and Adisa, but I think we know what those guys can do. So I'm excited to see the pass rush without it being that's the thing. Like, we do this all the time. Every year we do this. It's like, okay, one side had an advantage, so let's harp on the side that got beat and say that they're going to be awful. They're not going to be awful. I think they're going to be fine. So that's kind of where I'm at with that O-line, D-line discussion.
I will say, and to the point you started with, tackles 2 and 3 have to be better, and the consistency of what we've seen from them is, I think, the concern is that I'm not going to say Drew Shelton didn't get better, but it wasn't evident in that game against those players. And do they have enough to get through every game in the Big Ten? Yeah. But they are going to face guys of similar talent at the specific schools that we always harp on. And in those games, that right tackle position, I'm going to be watching it. So, I don't think that has changed. The offensive line overall can get better, and I do think that they will get better. But that right tackle position still feels, especially with Jimmy Chris going in the portal, I'm not saying he would fix any or all of these issues, but just the thinness at tackle is still a presence on this roster. So that would be one area where I would say I would lean more concerned that there was not more of a fight from those guys on Saturday. But I mean, deny Dennis-Sutton. I knew he was good. I knew he was working on his weaknesses. I don't know that I expected him to make that sort of transition so quickly. Eli here.
That one hurt because that round table that we did the day before, I had it typed out, or the first sentence or two, it was about deny, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna do the secondary. It's easy. They're good, whatever. And I deleted it. I was like, man, come on. Yeah, you had that one. You had that.
This guy.
Well, I mean, if you read our notes last week, you would know that Deny was the top performer all spring. So this was not a sudden bursting out period for him. He was pretty darn good, and that's director of the hype train since he was in high school. That's kind of where I'm at with him and KJ Winston. But those guys, they're pretty good.
Eli here. I don't know if I have anything because the only play I remember from Jackson was him fumbling the snap. But Eli wants to know thoughts on the small amount you saw from Jackson Smolik. Nate, do you remember anything from Jackson Smolik you want to point out?
Nope.
All right. How about you, Fitz? Anything?
I mean, he threw one pass, didn't he?
Yeah, I feel like it's a super chat. And I got nothing. I remember him being in the I remember physically seeing him, and I remember someone texting me and saying 14 is out there, and I'm having a flashback PTSD moment. But no, I don't have anything. The thing I will say about Jackson is I think he's a little bit stronger than they expected in terms of pushing the ball down the field. Good release, good deep ball, which is, that wasn't his scouting report. That wasn't his MO. He's the athlete that could get it done, short accuracy. So him throwing the ball downfield, they were happy with this spring. Whether we see any of that anytime soon, I don't know, but that's kind of where we're at with scouting Smolik. He just looks so young and so small next to those other guys that are not much older. I mean, just a year older, but you see the difference in a weight program for those two sophomores versus that incoming freshman that just got here. So he'll continue to develop. I think they feel good about where he is. I mean, it's not a situation where he came in and was like, we got to go start looking for another quarterback. I think this is he's got the physical tools to make it work. So no real insight on his blue-white game, but that hopefully that covers what we did. Thank you for the super chat.
I think that his shoulder injury really obscures what he was as a passer, because a lot of what he put on tape was he still was recovering from that injury. So it's encouraging to see that progress and arm strength get stronger. And you're right. I remember when Bo Pribula looked like that last year, and now he's the guy that looks bigger and stronger. So Blackheart 8541 had a very long and thoughtful question on the message board. It boils down to this. Which campus arrivals coming up from the freshman class are you most excited for on both sides of the ball, and why? I know I personally can't wait to see Dakari Nelson. So, Nate, do you have anybody that you are interested in when they arrive to campus and how they're going to fit, or some of the guys that I know this is not your area of expertise, but having listened to Fitz and I talk about these guys, is there anybody you're interested in seeing?
King Mac.
It's a good one.
That's a name. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Boom.
You did it.
I appreciate that you listen. That makes me happy that you listen, Nate. That's great.
I think there's some high expectations there, right?
Yeah.
He's
a good
got
player.
a great name.
Very good
So
player.
put it all together. Great name, high expectations. I'm excited. Boom. I answered.
Well, Blackheart took mine because I'm very excited for Dakari Nelson. Fitz, anybody on the defensive side, and then we can go both talk about Andrew Rappleyea on the offensive side. But anybody on the defensive side you want to point out?
Come on. Yeah. What else? Okay. First off, I can't wait to see the safety line that has Dakari Nelson beside King Mack, because that is going to be humorous. It's going to be 6'3" against 5'9.5". King Mack is really put together. So is Dakari Nelson. I mean, it's going to be like the Sean Oakman meme. Like that's going to be the difference there. Defensively, I don't know. I think Jameel Lyons is interesting. I don't foresee him breaking through and playing as a freshman, especially with what they have at defensive end, but pushing 6'5", 240s, he's got a lot to like there. Still curious to see long run. Is he still a defensive end? Can he handle it? Can he play at like 270? Like I could see that. That. Or does he eventually slide inside? So since you guys took the safeties, the easy answers, I'll go with Jameel Lyons, because I'm really excited to see what he can put together, knowing what we've seen from him on tape, knowing what we've seen from him from an athletic standpoint. I think he's going to continue to grow. I think he'll be possibly a better college player than he was a high school player.
The other guy I'm curious about, just maybe not as far as impact this year, but Mason Robinson's done a great job of physically putting it together this offseason. Just I saw a photo. I apologize. I should have had it up here of him at the blue-white game, and like his biceps are just twice the size they were before. So putting in that work that was really what he needed to do to be part of the conversation. The defensive end line is way too deep for him to be a part of the rotation this year, but in terms of being able to get to college and handle it, interested just to see kind of where some of these guys are on that perspective. Our next question here. If you got something in the chat that you want, let me know. We're going to go to one of our questions here. This one coming back to you, Fitz. This is I have absolutely no knowledge on this one personally, but I have heard you talk about this before. A little bit longer question. Beaver Hill says, early in his tenure, James Franklin and the staff seemed very preoccupied with the optics of missing on offered players, whether in PA or elsewhere. Last 5 years, the staff has gotten more comfortable increasing the number of offers and losing recruits they may have offered. Do you have insight on how this has changed recruiting philosophy? This goes into the offer lists, right, Fitz? You've talked a little bit about this before on the recruiting show. So for people here on the live show, when we're talking more about the team side, what's going on there as a part of that math?
So this is a change, not just at Penn State, but nationally. Like the offer lists have gotten out there because I think it has become so ingrained in the culture of recruiting in terms of social media, in terms of getting those, the visibility from these offers and things like that. And on top of that, with COVID, you didn't get a chance to travel as much. You didn't get a chance to evaluate as much, but you could still have that contact. You could still make kids, I don't want to say feel wanted, but you could give them the scholarship offer and they would, consider you. Like it used to be, you have these scholarship offers and you have the written scholarship offers. Those are the ones that matter, whatever. Even though they were no different, there's no legally binding written scholarship, verbal scholarship, whatever. And that was at one point in your recruitment. Now that has accelerated to basically, if you want to get in on a kid, you're probably going to have to offer him before much of the, not evaluation, but much of the conversation happens between the two sides. So you see a lot of this where guys talk to schools for the first time. They walk away with a scholarship offer. And then you see a lot of it where guys do that and then you don't hear from them again. Like that's kind of how it works. So it's now a tool in terms of getting guys to campus, because that's the logical next step, is getting guys to campus, getting your in-person, getting your eyes on him, getting an evaluation there. So I think that it's changed nationally. Where it goes for Penn State, yes, they did take some guys early in that tenure where you could say they were preoccupied with the stars. And had this discussion on the board yesterday. Coaches pay attention to recruiting rankings. Like, I know they don't want to admit it. Some do right off the bat, whatever. But they do. Like that's not to say that that's their evaluation. I think it was Randy Shannon's Miami team that got in trouble for this in terms of like offering every kid that was in the Rivals 250 or whatever. And then, some of them sucked. That's how it worked. And then they, blamed the recruiting services for it, which was even crazier. This is data. This is part of an evaluation. Like this is taking this and seeing what someone else is not seeing or not seeing what someone else is seeing. Like this is how you work into getting a full evaluation of the prospect. And like I was mentioning yesterday on the board, say we rate a kid pretty high, and a school like saw them, wasn't crazy about them. That school's going to go back and take another look and say, what do we miss? And 7 times out of 10, they're going to be like, I think we're okay with this. But other times we see them change their direction and go with it. I don't think it's a sense of schools are offering guys because of that number of stars that they have, but it's gotten so far out there. It's gotten so popular. It's gotten so much into like these people following recruiting 12 months a year that, there's some external pressure with that. And then there's relationship pressure with guys that run 7-on-7 teams in Florida. It's just like all these different entities that come into it. So as I'm rambling here, what I'm trying to say is like, you're not trying to get left at the dock here. You're not trying to miss out on something. And so you're going to do all the research that you can. That's why they have these big staffs. That's why they have these things. What it comes down to is how confident are you in your evaluation in the long run? And I think they've gotten better at that. Penn State is sort of one of those schools that you look to and say, Penn State has offered, there's probably something there. On the flip side, now they've offered 400 kids in this cycle. So it's kind of different. Yeah. Pennsylvania is interesting to me. I think they've offered 30 kids in Pennsylvania, might be able to take 10 of them. Like if it's like, if you widen your parameters there. So it also helps with relationships. You look at where some of these kids come from that have the offers, and you're offering 4 or 5 kids at a school. Probably not going to take 4 or 5 kids, definitely not going to take 4 or 5 kids at a school, but it helps your relationship. It helps you maybe with the 2026 prospect that you're looking at from that school. So there's a lot that goes into it that's more than just a check mark beside a guy's name or beside a school's name. So it's all about like fleshing out that evaluation process, being sure of it. And when you're sure of it, that's when you kind of take the next step, get them on campus, maybe work them out, do all this kind of stuff that takes it to the next level. I hate dating analogies, but it's just like, there's a difference between a first date and getting engaged. There's levels to this. So that's what I would say about this. Penn State's done a really nice job. I feel like early on in the tenure, they felt like they had to take more Pennsylvania guys. I feel like they had to
build those relationships, right?
Yeah,
to kind of establish themselves.
To establish themselves more so. Like to James Franklin comes out and says dominate the state. Like that puts expectations on that like that weren't there before. Like, and maybe they were there subconsciously, but like it puts it out there. And every time he loses somebody in the state, somebody rubs that in his face. Like It comes out with that soundbite. So that's kind of where it changes with Pennsylvania. I think now you're offering 30 kids. It helps those kids get out there. And for the most part, these coaches, these high school coaches, have an idea that that kid can't play at Penn State. Like if one of those other 20 or other 15 or whatever. So, but it helps them get that out there. It's always funny to me because I feel like we're in picked over season right now. So like every tweet you see with a kid committing somewhere, for example, Donovan Harbour picked Penn State over Ohio State, over Wisconsin, over Michigan, like all those things. And that's why I stay away from that, because like you don't know where they're at in their evaluation. You don't know where they're at in the board, unless it's a situation where you've got a couple of official visits lined up or a couple of official visits that have happened. It's so hard to say that. And, you get a little spin on the other side as well. So that's kind of where I'm at with this question. I think it's a very good question. I think it's a very broad-based question because so many things have changed in the last, I was going to say 5 years, but like even 3 years, like post-COVID, with expectations, with evaluations and things like that. You look at Penn State's class of 2021, and they really needled those evaluations. Not the sense that they got them all right, but there were guys on that list that wanted to come here. I saw Landon Watson went into the portal from TCU this week. Like he wanted to come to Penn State. Penn State didn't want to take that chance on a guy they really didn't know about. Corey Kiner, the running back that went to LSU, I think he's now at Cincinnati. Like there were guys that wanted to jump on board, but they were so conservative with what they were doing. If you didn't run a 40 for them, like if you didn't have a track time on file, they didn't want to take you until they had the opportunity to scout you. So I don't know that that's going to I think Penn State's class of 2021 was more researched than any before it and any since it. And I think that that's a really interesting case study to look at and see how they did in terms of evaluating, how they approached it in terms of evaluation. So I think that's a pretty cool way to look at things from an outsider perspective. You're never going to see the actual board and things like that, but we do a pretty good job here at Blue White. So continue to follow our coverage, and I'm trying to wind my way out of it. Does anybody want to say anything?
I'll jump in for you. How about that?
Stop
Okay.
talking.
I got something from John Wallets here in the chat, which I think kind of I was mesmerized by all the information you were giving us, and I was learning quite a bit. John was as well. I think it's the first time I caught something streaming live on YouTube that genuinely interests me. So thank you, John. Thanks for being a new member here of our tribe at the BWI Live show on Wednesday. We will be back next week. It's the springtime. There are no more football games, no more practices to cover. So we will be getting into some creative content. We'll also be mixing things up a little bit. Appreciate everything that Nate and Fitz have done so far this spring, giving us insight into practice, giving us their behind the scenes opinions on stuff. And just guys, thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate you.
Hey, it's our pleasure. I think I've said enough. So.
I appreciate you.
All right. We'll be back with any breaking news. We'll have some more fun stuff coming up on the YouTube channel. But, of course, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is where you get all of it. We'll be back next Monday with the recruiting show. We'll talk to you then.